My name is Sam Coronado, and I'm an artist and printmaker after 35 years. What I did when I was a little kid, I did a lot of drawing and a lot of painting with paint by number sets. Me and my cousin Fred Martinez, who is also very instrumental in me, in pushing me to become an artist as we grew up. I went to the Army, came out, started to go into art school at a community college there in Dallas, and decided that maybe I should do something different outside of art to support my habit. And so I started taking engineering drawing classes, basically drafting. And as a result, I wound up working for Texas Instruments as a technical illustrator. That was my first real professional job. While I was there, I was going to school, continuing in my art education, and eventually wound up in Austin, Texas here. Was going to started going to art school at the University of Texas. Finished that up and tried to make a living as an artist, but really was hard in those days, mid-70s, and decided to go to Houston to teach art there at a place called the Association for the Advancement of Mexican Americans, or AMA, and started teaching there, but that wasn't very lucrative, so I went back to my original field of technical illustrating, and did that during the day, and did my art at night. Also funded a lot of different art projects on my own to exhibit and promote our Latino arts there in Houston. Became involved a little bit with the Chicano movement on the fringes, you might say. First as a student here at UT, and then eventually when I went to Houston, participated in a lot of different marches and events that occurred there while I was there. All the time thinking about what my direction in terms of an artist would be. So I started working a lot on my own personal portraits of folks that I knew. Started doing a little bit of different genre kind of painting throughout my stay in Houston, and then came back to Austin. During that time I started experimenting with various media, from watercolors to pastels, and you name it, I tried to do it. About the only thing I wasn't really involved with was the traditional printmaking media. I'd done some wood cuts and some linoleum cuts, but never did get involved with lithography or etchings and that sort of thing. Somehow or another I got involved with printmaking through Self-Help Graphics, a couple of visits there in East Los Angeles, and came back and decided that maybe something like that, a project modeled after Self-Help Graphics, would be an interesting thing to do here in Austin, and perhaps even in the state. So at that point I had a painting studio that eventually became a printing studio. The very first project we did through the Serie actually was a project that was actually funded through La Peña, another arts organization here in Austin, and it was an umbrella for the Serie for about 6 or 7 years. First project, which I thought was going to be the first and the last, was in 1993 actually, and that incorporated about 12 artists that I had invited to come and do prints. At that point I had acquired some printing equipment. I made some, I purchased some, but it was all functioning, and we still use some of the equipment to this day. But I invited about 12 artists to come in and do a print, and thinking that that was going to be the first and last time of that project, and it wasn't really looking towards the future and continuing it. I resubmitted a grant that I had written for the first year, and it was approved for a second year. And then it was approved for the third year. And now we're on our 18th year of production. And over those 18 years, the Serie Project has hosted, I would say, close to 300 artists. Some of them have been here a couple of times producing prints, but most of them was their first time. Most artists have never done, or at least the artists that we had invited for the most part, had never done a screen print. They had been involved in different types of media, from actually printmaking to painting. Most of them are painters. Some are photographers. We've also invited sculptors, but most of them had not experienced screen printing, or very little in their experiences as artists. So it was a learning process. It's a learning process for them when they come here. They only have a week to produce an art piece, so print serigraph piece. So they, you might say, hit the ground running when they get here. We are, at this point, we're scheduled to go to Argentina to exhibit Tejano art prints, our serigraph prints that we produced in our studio, Buenos Aires in particular. So we're looking forward to that. We've been all over the United States, Texas, Mexico, some in Europe. We've also been to Slovakia and all sorts of venues in Latin America and Mexico. We would not have gotten this far if it hadn't been for persistence and perhaps some luck. But at this point in time, I think there's only a handful of Latino-based art print shops that are here in the United States. There are a lot of individuals with print shops and that have their own presses, but very few specialize in serigraphy like we do, and are funded as we are to produce the prints that we have produced. I'm not really sure if I had to actually plan to become printmaker. I think I've kind of fallen into it. Early training was in painting and perhaps photography. But when a door opens, you need to make sure that you go through it and experience whatever's on the other side, and I think that's what I did. The World War II series was actually inspired by, at this point, by the World War II Oral History Project that Maggie Rivas directs from the University of Texas here in Austin, and also some of the thoughts that I had a while back, but I just didn't know how to approach that that particular series. I know that World War II was an important part of the Mexican-American history, as well as American Latino history, because it introduced a lot of us, or a lot of our fathers and grandfathers, into a realm of our society, and you might say culture, that we hadn't been exposed to. Unfortunately, it was through war. And so the fact that they did participate in World War II and then came back and took advantage of the GI Bill, of the educational opportunities, of housing opportunities, and possibly in the 50s became very assimilated and tried to become part of that American dream. I think that was an important part, an important place in our history. World War II was, and how it influenced our father's generation. We are part of the fabric of the art history now here in the United States. We are becoming more and more of an important part of it, and I think that in the future you'll see a lot more of the Latino American coming into play within that whole art realm that we call American art. I'm hoping that if everything evolves the way it has been evolving the past 15, 20 years, that we will make a very important contribution, if we haven't already, to that art, to the art history part of American art history. And I'm hoping that more and more young artists that are evolving into professional artists will also become more important within the collection of Latino arts throughout the United States, museums, universities. And I can see a prominent future for Latino art. And, I think that if we just keep pushing and trying to promote ourselves in terms of where we're at right now and where we want to be in the future, I think we have a very good chance of letting the whole world know who we are, where we come from, and hopefully where we're going.